Hey YouTube, I'm JMeister4. Now I just have a few quick things I want to say before I start. I'm aware that Archie has had issues with people uploading their content in the past. Like Sonic Comic World, for example. I miss him, you miss him, but he's the reason why I even bothered getting a subscription to the comics, because he got me caught up. Now I really want to avoid an issue like that, so I'm going to try and summarize the stories without showing the full comics. I've also read that Archie filed a cease and desist order to a website called fanfiction.net to remove all of their copywritten content because it hurt their public image. So while I may crack a few jokes during this, I mean the best, and I do this with the best intentions, so please. And finally, if I ever actually get far in the series, I'll stay around 10 issues behind the current release to avoid anyone using my videos as an excuse not to get a subscription. So now that that's out of the way, I'll start this video with what I was originally going to say.
Alright, so theoretically not everyone here needs or wants a full summary of each individual comic. So I've put together a list of key events and spark notes in the description box, which I can edit and change as new comics are released or mistakes are noticed, which is why I'm not going to verbally list them off right now. So now I'll move right into the summaries, commentaries, and retrospectives of Sonic comic issues 1 through 10. Alright, the first issue I ever do, guys. This is going to be fun to look back on. It starts off with Robotnik hanging Sonic by the throat and beating him to death, only to be revealed as a piñata. It's an interesting way to open. The story summary is that Robotnik released a plant named Krudzu that was planted by a burrowbot that was supposed to devour the Great Forest, but gets destroyed by rain. Yeah, it's about as quirky as the twist in War of the Worlds, where the aliens get killed by the common cold. So, story number 2. The summary, Robotnik unveils his new invention, which is Orbinaut, or the Purple Badnik from Sonic 2. Robotnik ends up capturing Sonic in a ball and puts him in a pinball machine, only to have Sonic escape and blow everything up. As for why Sonic showed up and casually stood at the front of the stage, I'll just never know. Now, those are the only canon stories in the comic. The rest are little quirky, off-panel jokes. I'll leave you on a limb if you want to read those. That's what the actual comics are for. They just made the comic funny and enjoyable at the time, and I'm never going to bring this up again, so let's move on. So, comic number 2. In summary, the first story introduces Coco Nuts, who goes after Sonic and Tails, gets destroyed by his nuts, only to have Robotnik send out Scratch and Grounder, who get defeated by Sonic as well. The story is basically an Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog plot, which are never any more intricate or fascinating as I made it sound. So, moving on. Sonic is gathering rings when he gets plunged into a new zone. There are 2 meth heads named Vertical and Horizontal. After the acid trip of a story that I can't even say quite existed, he just plummets back to reality. The only thing I can really infer is that Michael Gallagher, or the writer of these early comic plots, did a few too many lines when he came up with this idea in limbo. But in all seriousness, these 2 characters will appear in a few issues down the road and in the Sonic universe. We now enter comic number 3. Where I was surprised to see that Robotnik finally gets the smarts and invents the bomb. Contemplating their inevitable doom, Sonic, Sally, and Rotor retrieve Robotnik's best idea to date, only to figure out it was a bomb to stop his inevitable insect infestation. Yes, Robotnik, I was equally as dumbfounded when I finished reading. I guess Mikey wrote this directly after his last sensical tale. So, without really much else to say, the next story involves a key character. Sonic and Rotor travel south to discover a bunny rabbit about to be thrown in a robot maker, as it was referred to at the time. I'll just call it Roboticide there from here on out. Only to be saved halfway during the process. Returning to Knothole, the bunny announces her witty and innovative name to be Bunny, displays her new abilities, acclaims her ultimate life ambition to be Sally's hairdresser, and virtually defeats a massive burrowbot single-handedly. An interesting side note to most of these issues is that Antoine is considered to be wearing a wig. And all fourth wall jokes aside, I don't have much else to say in retrospective. So, what do? I move on to issue number 4. Now, in summary, Robotnik invents Universalamander. Yeah. Of which consumes Sonic and leaves everyone thinking he's dead. only to have him be spit out, travel to the special zone, return as supersonic, and shrink it down to molecular size. That's it. After the meth heads play baseball, a villain audition, and Sally gets a perm, the last story worth talking about has Tails leaving to start his own adventure. After attacking and destroying a few badniks, he decides to tackle Robotnik by himself, only to be captured, then saved, and, well, nothing. Taught a lesson, I guess. So, halfway through these earth-shattering mindfucks, we now have Robotnik challenging Sonic to a competition. He decides to tackle the challenge with his friends to accompany him, except for Tails, who gets shot down, but decides to build Sonic a sculpture because of how awesome he is. While Sonic went swimming at some unexplained point in time, his shoes were swapped with, gasp, energy-draining shoes. Left unable to compete, his friends decide to compete for him and obviously lose every event because they're rendered useless to the writer. Meanwhile, Tails is gathering pieces for Sonic's sculpture when he comes across, double gasp, Sonic's shoes. He races them to the stadium just in time for the final race of Antoine versus a Buzz Bomber that was just about to finish. He gives them to Sonic, who confuses the robot, causing Antoine to win the race. The next story has Rotor developing a fetish for ant farms, so they order one only to have Robotnik send them a wood-eating termite instead. Sonic copies some of Sally's terrible cooking skills, sealing the termite's mouth shut long enough for Rotor to rewire it to eat metal, and sending it back to Robotropolis at Robotnik's misfortune. Awesome. Now for number 6. To incorporate the game's release, Sonic Spinball, our good pal Mikey sends Sonic to a volcano where Sonic runs in on pinball tracks, defeats assorted robots, and encounters 2 kangaroos named Hip and Hop, who guide him in the right direction. After discovering a container filled with Mobians, Sonic gets tricked and launched out of the volcano, only to be saved by Tails as the elaborate pinball machine gets blown sky high, and from what I concur, killed everybody inside, except for Robotnik and the Jumpy Duo, who appear in future issues. The final story is a season special of the classic holiday tale, A Christmas Carol. In short, the story has Robotnik as Ebenezer Scrooge, Rotor as Bob Cratchit, and cameos of Snively and Uncle Chuck, who appear in this issue for the first time. The story veers quite far from the actual plot of the actual story, but finishes with the notion that it was all just Sonic's dream. Moving on to issue 7, the first story is mostly action panels, but the generic plot is that Sonic and his friends are searching for Uncle Chuck's treasure. After retrieving the treasure, Eggman escapes with it, but Sonic doesn't mind because he figured out what the treasure was, and that was a pair of his bronze baby shoes. Story number 2 revolves around Sally, as she requires a staff to complete her Halloween getup. She orders everyone not to follow her outside, as she is content on taking care of herself. After finding a stick, a fluke leads her to believing that it is actually magical. Robotnik sees this, and not knowing it is Sally, immediately gets his hard on, and he runs to Sally and forces her to marry him. But to Sally's misfortune, realizes that her staff isn't actually capable of magical powers. Sonic sees all this from a hiding spot and just follows them. Robotnik takes Sally to an old hall where he demands she display her power. Sonic inexplicably turns invisible, becomes the surrogate for Sally's magic, and takes off with her. Sally then says, "Thanks for getting me out of there, and fuck you for disobeying orders." Aside from the random superpower that Sonic was given, another interesting thing to bring up about this comic is an off-panel story. Sonic is fighting his shadow and makes a clear statement that he can move faster than the speed of light. From what I began to notice, they continue to try to almost make Sonic omnipotent in the issues to come, but I'm assuming these concepts were dropped as the comic began to get more and more somber. So, Sonic number 8 is a very interesting issue. From the cover, you can see Spider-Man, Captain America, Batman, Ghost Rider, and a few others caught in Sonic's smoke trail. And I kind of think that our good buddy Mikey was trying to emphasize that this comic was a cartoony and not serious, which at the time it was, but still, I believe most of these stories were never considered canon. The first story is a gag. I'd say you should just go out and read it yourself because it's hardly worth summarizing. There's a Batman bot, a Captain Marvel bot, a Steve Urkel bot, a Spawn bot, and a couple others, all being defeated by Sonic in the end. The next story parades in with Sonic jamming on the guitar. After an awkward symbolic joke made by Bunny, the Freedom Fighters go to a concert hall to form a band in a time of great peril and the fate of every citizen of Metropolis hanging in the balance. But little do they know that Robotnik heard Sonic's music and decides to show up and make a Sugarland concert out of the opportunity. He shrinks the heroes using, well, another shrink ray, and attempts to suck everyone up in a vacuum roboticizer. His plan almost works, as he nearly sucks up Sonic in a backup dustbuster after losing his ride-on vacuum, but gets saved by none other than Sonic's friends. There's a first time for everything. So everyone grows back to normal size, plays music, and scares off Robotnik because, you know, it's his one and only weakness. In retrospective, this comic was misleading because at the end of part 1, it shows Sonic's friend almost being vacuumed up, and then immediately showing them missing beginning of part 2, and it's assumed that they were sucked away, but then it shows them running and unharmed a few panels later. Alright, almost there. Issue number 9. Starts out with Pseudo-Sonic, Robotnik's new evil creation to combat Sonic. While Sonic is out picking flowers, he accidentally picks a bouquet of poison blossoms, leaving him like that. Antoine accidentally lets Pseudo-Sonic into Knothole, but before it can send the coordinates and reveal the secret city of Knothole to Robotnik, Tails pulls in and disrupts the robot by running around it and creating a static discharge. Word gets to the freedom fighters that Robotnik is after Swollen Sonic, and Bunny gets to his rescue just in time. Alright, two things. One, I'm on strong ground in the fact that I think that Tails should be able to run almost as fast as Sonic himself. If he could do it in Sonic 2 and 3, where he was like first introduced, he should be able to do it in all other Sonic media. And two, this issue had a character named Betty Butterfly that never reappears, so I just completely left her out. Alright, the next story starts out with Sonic gathering flowers for Sally's birthday when a bird falls on his head. After Sonic is refused to be allowed to keep it, and it eats Sally's birthday cake, he takes it out while Sally goes looking for more ingredients to make another cake. While Sonic was putting the bird back, Sally gets attacked by a mechanical tree. Sonic attempts to save her, but actually gets saved by the bird, which assists Sonic in taking down the tree and craps on Robotnik's head. The bird is named an honorary freedom fighter, but is never actually heard from again. Finally, the on and off humor and monotonous talking is coming to a close as we finish off with Sonic issue 10. The story begins with Sonic destroying landmines so Rotor can safely salvage some cables for their own use. They get caged by a force field with SWAT bots closing in. A creature comes from the ground and unwillingly leads them to Nerbs City. Poor hospitality causes them to just want out. They find an abandoned sewer line, but hear noises at one end. Sonic recons and sees Robotnik causing havoc with a group of Nerbs held hostage. He frees the Nerbs, rushes them back to safety, then floods the sewer line, which saves the Nerbs from Robotnik, and they're crowned for their deeds. The Nerbs in this story never reappear until Sonic Universe 37, and there's also a brief Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cameo as Sonic runs through the sewers, mainly because Archie owned the rights to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic at the time. So the last and final story of this issue has Antoine bringing everyone up in a hot air balloon only to be shot down by buzz bombers as they're looking for their new spot to have their picnic. Robotnik hears of this and decides to go intervene. Antoine gets sad that he failed everybody, so he takes off. And then when Robotnik shows up on a rhino to ruin their picnic, Antoine shows up on a hot air balloon, defeats all the robots, and dumps Robotnik in a lake. So it's nice to see in this issue that Antoine gets some justice, because in all of the earlier issues and in the TV show, he's always considered the twerp and the coward. So, it's kind of nice. It's kind of the first story where he actually does something that contributes. So, in the end, the first 10 issues were intended for cheap reads right off the shelf, appealing to maybe young kids or like die-hard Sonic fans. I hope my summaries and commentaries will improve as I both continue to make these videos and the comics get more rich in story, which may or may not allow me to slow down and maybe do 5 or 3 comics at a time. Now, if anyone out there is interested and wants to help me do these, send me an unlisted link of you reviewing a Sonic issue, and if it meets this criteria, I'll be more than happy to use it, because this video alone took a lot of my time. And that's it. I hope to see you guys in a few weeks when I do a summary, commentary, and retrospective of Sonic Comics 11 through 20.